questions. And thank you all for tuning in today. We have people attending from a range of different industries and throughout the country. Some technical notes: in your window, you'll see a poll tab. We have a current poll to get us started. It is anonymous, and we'd greatly appreciate you responding. To the left of polls, you'll see Q&A. We'll be addressing questions at the end, but please add your questions in as you think of them. The webinar will be recorded and will be emailed to everyone. So if you have people who are unable, and also if you have people who are unable to register, it'll be available on our website. And finally, bandwidth is an issue everywhere lately. I apologize in advance for any problems. We'll work through them. So spare you all the bio stuff, but this is my picture. My bio's on the website. I won't spend a lot of time talking about myself. My Army career was in communications. Post-Army, I did IT and physical security, and a lot of that was all about crime prevention. And all of those fields continue to converge as connectivity becomes more and more tied to what we do in everyday life. AE Works, my employer and sponsor of this series, offers architecture, engineering, construction management, security services, and planning. And that's all the marketing we're going to do today. So today we'll go over some very specific fraud types that you're likely to see dramatically increasing in both number of attempts and the number of victims now that we've gone into this COVID-19 environment. Excuse me. These certainly aren't the only types of fraud that exist, but they're the ones you're probably the most vulnerable to. So a brief qualifier on why we should care. Target and Yahoo are the two examples on the slide, but the hackers also got Facebook. So that's a major retailer and two IT companies with what should be very robust IT security departments. They got compromised. And they certainly had way better technology than anybody on this webinar has. And then there's some that aren't on the slide. So we have Anthem, the insurance provider. They lost 80 million patient credit cards and medical records, all because 5 employees opened malware attachments. Home Depot, roughly $800 million in estimated costs for credit monitoring after their breach. The hackers there got in through a vendor's login credentials. So it didn't matter how good the Home Depot's firewalls and traffic sniffers were. The hackers found the weak link, and that weak link wasn't even a company employee. So the takeaway here is that you can invest in the absolute best technology. You can hire the best IT department money can buy. A phishing scam is successful if they can get just one person to open an attachment. So the scammers don't have to beat your IT department. They don't have to beat your technology. They have to beat your weak link, your least technologically adept person. And here's some statistics on how this works. So we have almost 2 billion phishing emails going out on a daily basis. The best filters get 90% of that. So you don't have the best filters. Think about the Pentagon. Think, the internal Google headquarters. They have the best. Our corporate Gmail, we're a step or two down from that. Regardless, let's go with 90% effectiveness. So that still has about 2 million getting through every day. And then with 32 million businesses in the US, that means one's getting through to your business every 15 days. We know that phishing emails have about a 27% open rate. So when you figure that out, it's about every month and a half, someone you work with is opening a phishing email. And at that point, once that email is open, you are one click away, one click from that person clicking on that attachment, and then the hacker's in your system. That's how close we come to compromise on a monthly basis. So consider that as we go through this. This stuff is not that far out there, and it's important to know. So I'll leave this quote on for a minute. This was from a presentation I listened to yesterday from a very respected person. If you don't know who Kevin Mitnick is, he's one of the people who basically invented hacking. When he was in prison, he wasn't allowed to use a phone because the government believed and actually convinced a judge that he could make fax machine noises with his mouth and trigger a breach of NORAD. When he got out of prison, he turned good guy, and now he works in the IT security field. But in addition to his technical side, he was an absolute master at social engineering, which is a fancy way of saying modern day con man. He could get on the phone with just your name and call a bank, and just by getting people to give up little pieces of information on each of his subsequent calls, he would have your credit card number in less than 10 calls. So if he's telling you that people at home are stressed and distracted and that they've never been more vulnerable to phishing attacks, I recommend accepting that as a fact. And here's some of Mitnick's warning signs. He's got a number of books out, and I believe these are from his first one. And if you dissect any scam call or scam email, you're going to see at least a couple of these common throughout. First and foremost, the email, the contact, it's out of the ordinary. They're trying to get you to do something you're not supposed to do. That's going to seem weird. Something is always going to seem off. Second, they're going to generally come at you with some kind of authority claim. All right, they're your boss. They're an important client. They're the government regulator, or on the personnel side, they're your mortgage company or the IRS, something like that. They're going to try to instill the belief in you that they have power and that you're in a position where you have to listen to them. There's going to be some level of urgency. The idea being, if they can instill urgency, they can make you make a rash decision that's likely to be incorrect. So that it's going to be time sensitive. You're going to have 48 hours to get this done. It needs to be done today. It needs to be done before lunch. It needs to be done ASAP. There's going to be some kind of urgency to it. There's always going to be some kind of negative consequence, either embarrassment, loss of money, loss of opportunity, loss of access to a system you need. Again, some kind of negative consequence if you don't do whatever's being requested. Moving on to the second column, if you were to ask this more towards the voice end of things, but if you start asking questions, the scammer's going to get tripped up, or they'll become unnecessarily aggressive, and those are all signs of getting caught in a lie. They might start dropping names. So, for example, if somebody was trying to scam me, they'll say, "I talked with Mike, the owner of your company, and he said to call you." Or if it's a more generic scam, they're going to say, "Are you aware that governor's executive order states blah blah blah?" All right, they're name dropping. They're trying to, through association, establish their position. And they might also be unnecessarily complimentary. So if you're reading some scammer email, you're going to see you might see some line of text that says, "You're smart to have read this far in this email. The people who deleted it without opening it are generally not top performers," or something like that. Keep these in the back of your mind as we go through some of these attacks that we're going to get into with the next slide. So phishing, why do they call it that? You cast a wide net and hope you get a couple of victims. These are the bulk of those 2 billion scam emails that get sent out every day. And here's some warning signs. As it says on the slide, the grammar is usually bad. There's at best some tenuous connection to you, possibly none whatsoever. The sender's going to have some kind of generic name or no name that you recognize whatsoever. And they'll likely contain some kind of attachment, which ultimately ends up being a virus, right? Or they'll have some kind of malware link. Either way, there's going to be something that you have to interact with in that email. And this is a breakdown. Hopefully, you can read this, but this is a breakdown of an actual email that my company's spam filter did pick up. So right there in the subject line, you see it circled. You have the authority claim. It's right there. The security department. I better pay attention to these guys. Again, and it's generic, right? It doesn't say Herb. It says the security department. Moving through it, in that left column, you'll see 2 instances. There's some consequences for not complying with whatever this guy's going to demand later. In this case, he's going to show my family and colleagues the adult content he alleges I'm looking at while at work. And then we have the demand. So he wants $1,500, and we have the urgency, which is circled there. I have 2 days to comply. And then throughout the email, we have terrible grammar. So, all right, this is ridiculous. And you might be thinking, why do the scammers even bother? And it goes back to that numbers game. All right. Statistically, someone in the United States, someone is looking at pornography on a work device today. All right. And all the scammer has to do is have that email and that victim meet up under the right set of circumstances, and this works. So it doesn't matter. There's very little investment on the hacker's part. There's almost no risk and high return, right? For the couple of clicks it took to send an email to a couple of hundred people, that's his sole investment. So he can make $1,500 if he catches one person. That's a pretty good return. All right, now take the absurd thing of the pornography at work and replace it with something a little more real, like a late bill payment or an incorrect expense report item. And now all of a sudden, this email's not that far out there. So, keep in mind, it doesn't have to be this absurd, but all of those elements will still be there. And this is another one. This one's a little more sophisticated, but it's still in the phishing realm. I don't have all of this circled in the slide, but you have the authority. It's my cell phone provider, right? My Apple ID. It's a real pain in the butt if I get locked out of that. So that's a consequence. And this is out of the ordinary. Why is this why is this in an email and not on one of my iPhone notifications? And how is my ID locked if I'm using my phone and I have full functionality? So this is very, very out of the ordinary. But other than that, that's all we have to go on in this. And if you were to actually click that link, and don't forget, iforgot.apple.com is or was an actual Apple site. But if you click that, it's not going to take you there. It's going to take you to a fake site that's going to have you enter account info or personal data, and it's going to steal that and use it for nefarious purposes. And that blue text, if you're not programming savvy, that blue text can direct you anywhere. It's basic programming. It's HTML. That's more than 20 years old. Those types of hyperlinks. So like I said before, it's a little more sophisticated. And now with lots of people working from home, they need that cell phone. They need those apps. So think hypothetically with me, if you will. You've got an employee, they're working in a telework situation for the first time. And, with all of this other stuff going on, right? They got the kids going nuts. Their wife's busy trying to work. Maybe the guy's mother's sick and she refuses to go to the doctor. He hasn't slept right in weeks. Is clicking on this link that incomprehensible in that circumstance? And then looking on the right side, if you do dig a little deeper and actually open that contact up, you'll see that the actual email address tied to quote unquote Apple support isn't a noreply.apple.com address. So it becomes pretty obvious that it's a scam. Now, spear phishing, you've seen a couple of phishing instances. Spear phishing, we're just getting a little more accurate and a little more dialed in. The scammer's doing a little more research in order to try to snag you with this scam. So maybe they'll figure out who your boss is, or they'll figure out who an important client is, or they might just identify somebody that's in your company. And the goal here is to get your guard down with some degree of familiarity. So you can see in the example, the scammer changed his email name to be the owner of the company, Michael Cherok. He obviously didn't change the email address to anything even close. But you can see, and he even stuck the owner's name in the to line. So the other thing is, it's not that out of the ordinary for the owner of a company to post something or send out an article or video that he wants the staff to look at and comment on. So the only tell here is that incorrect email address. And then they can even get more clever with that. So our email addresses in the company are all ae-works.com. The scammer might use an underscore instead of a dash and otherwise be Mike at AE Works. Or he could use 2 dashes. You look at it quick, you're just going to read right over that. Or maybe they'll use a .net instead of a .com. There's lots of ways that they can make it a little more sophisticated than this. And there might not be an attachment or a link in that first email. All right. Another flip on this is that this might be an email from the owner saying, I'm in a meeting. Can you do something for me? And all they want you to do is write back yes, because that happens, right? You text when you're in a meeting, you email when you're in a meeting, what have you. Once that back and forth starts, you have a conversation, your guard's down, and then, the attachment or the bad link is going to be in one of those follow-up messages, and then they've got you there. This is another one. I've got some black boxes over things because I didn't want the sender and company identified. I can explain why later. But what they're doing is making emails look like they're part of an ongoing email string. So, your habit, your mind is telling you that, well, it's got an RE in the subject. So this is safe. This is something that, I've been doing. So I can open this. What the scammers are going to do is either they'll have compromised one of the accounts on that email string, and think about how many email strings you have with 5-10 people on them. So that's not that ridiculous. And they'll just insert a virus payload and says, well, I think this speaks to it. And then, it's a PDF document. You're fairly likely to open that. Or they'll just start an email and put RE in the subject line on that very first email. Either way, that's, that one's picking up a lot. And people are going to be more vulnerable to this than you initially think. What's your normal procedure if you take time off at your company? You forward your email to somebody. In this case, that's exactly what happened. Somebody that worked for me by the name of Chris had his email forwarded to my inbox. And, how on earth should I know what conversations they have going on? You have somebody take a day off or two, you do some continuity talk, but they're certainly not going to brief me on every single email they ever got. And then in your own company, you've probably got a lot more reliance on email and electronic communications than you do with face-to-face interactions that you would have had in the past. So you have people taking time off. You have people that can't work certain days and they have to put their email on forward. So this is going to continue throughout this COVID crisis, and you're going to have a lot of people that get caught by this specific scam right here during this lockdown. And then we have CEO fraud. And you'll hear this called business email compromise and a number of other terms. It's very sophisticated phishing. And just because it's sophisticated doesn't mean that it's not uncommon or that you aren't a target. It's still a very low risk proposition for scammers, and the reward it's much higher. The only change for them is it's a slightly greater time investment, but even that's not that bad. And the thing with these is that there aren't that many tells. You have to be really sharp, or you really have to have solid organizational procedures to prevent yourself from being victimized by these. So the scammers are going to get in somehow, right? Either they'll compromise an account, possibly through one of the phishing schemes we just talked about, or maybe through social engineering, or somehow they'll insert themselves into one of your process, or they can even just find an unlocked workstation, which is like a gold mine. And then they're going to look at things. They're not going to act right away. They'll see what types of transaction happen through your email. They're going to see what types of vulnerabilities they can exploit. If their target is a big company or the government, hackers will sit on this for months and months. For a small company, they can figure this out in about 10 minutes just looking through your inbox. And then they're going to carry out the attack. So they might see that you have a monthly billing notification from a supplier, or they'll figure out who your property manager is, and they'll see that your bill reminder comes every month on the 5th. Well, what they're going to do maybe is they'll send one on the 2nd stating you should send payment over to this new account. They might even copy your vendor or landlord's webpage so it looks just like the old one. Easy. Another thing they might do is impersonate the boss. They'll tell employees to they'll send an email that says employees go register for this and put a link on it. The link will pop up to a legitimate looking site that'll have something to do with something your business might be involved in, and it'll accept credit card info, and there's a couple of grand gone. They might try to get other key personnel to compromise accounts. Like the example there, the boss tells IT to reset the password and send it over to them. That's not that odd. They might mess with your finance department. And remember, they're going to have read all your emails. So the example in here is actually going to have something to do with, it's going to be tailored to your situation. But they'll look into your email and see that there's some kind of ongoing issue, and they might redirect some kind of escrow. They might redirect some kind of payment, again, by impersonating the CEO. And they might go after employees by impersonating different kinds of key personnel. So your finance person, they might spoof the controller and start asking employees to give up social security numbers, dates of birth, or maybe just ask them to fill out a new W-4 for whatever reason. Super easy to get information that way. I alluded to the email message bullet. I alluded to that earlier, but you have somebody in a supervisory position or somebody in a key position send an email that says, "Did you get my voicemail?" Then all they're looking for is that reply, "No, I didn't. What can I do for you?" They get you bouncing back and forth, and then sooner or later there's an attachment or a bad link, and there's the malware. And it can go the other way too. They could impersonate an employee and try to convince support staff to cough up some information. An example one is somebody's on travel. They might write back to the finance department. I'm on the road. My wife needs information. My last 3 pay stubs for a loan. Can you send them over? Again, fair amount of information that they can get that way. And this is the last slide. So if you've been waiting to put in any questions, feel free to do so now. So what can you do? The best thing you can do is get your staff trained and aware. So you're literally doing the best thing you can do right now. And And this webinar, excuse me, this will be available as a recording, so feel free to use it. You'll likely want to invest in a training provider that can tailor the awareness training to your specific company, but this is a really good start, and it's going to put you ahead. The second thing is to invest in some kind of data backup. I didn't mention it previously in the presentation, but a lot of the attachments that the scammers try to get you to open are something called ransomware. So if you open the attachment, it locks you out of your own computer, and the only way back in is if you pay. Having a periodic backup minimizes the impact of this because you can just erase the locked computer, reinstall the operating system, and put your most recent backup in instead of paying for the ransomware. Procedures. They're another really great low-cost method to guard against these scams, especially in the new telework environment. Just go ahead and start a procedure that, no payments, no changes to payments without voice confirmation. So when you get an email from, in the example, the landlord saying that the account's changed, call the number you have for the landlord on file, not the number in the email. Call the number you have on file and physically verify with the landlord that that's what you have to do. It's free. All you have to do is be disciplined enough to do it. And then two-factor authentication. This helps you avoid some of the account compromises. Folks that worked in a government, they've been on systems where you have to insert a card and then type a PIN to get on a computer. So two factors, right? You have the card and you know the PIN. Google offers this for their Gmail services. You put in a password and then you get a text with a temporary PIN when you log in. So you know your password and you have the phone that gets the PIN. And there's your two factors. And of course, there's the big investments, better firewalls, traffic monitoring, more IT staff scans. The list goes on and on. But that's really outside the scope of this presentation. That being said, I'll happily answer any questions you have on that stuff. So with that, we're into Q&A, and please feel free to submit those questions. And this is the contact information. Should you have any questions outside of this briefing? Now I'm just trying to find my Q&A. All right, so we have one question, which is, what are examples of protocols we should have to help mitigate against CEO fraud attacks? So the CEO fraud attacks, one of the best things you can do is that voice verification that I mentioned earlier. And what you're doing there is the banks have done this for years, and they call it a out of band verification. Basically, what they'll get a wire request. So apply this to your circumstance. They'll get a request in, and then they'll call a number they have on file previously to verify that this is legitimate. And if anything seems wrong, they'll initiate some other protocols. You can very easily do the same thing. Start with a blanket policy that says I, as the owner of the company, will never send out an email that says register for this and not offer any explanation. I will, and then make sure that there's also a non-punitive aspect to it. If I will never get upset with anybody if they call me to verify, some kind of bill or some kind of financial obligation that I've asked them to undertake. That's where I would start with that, and then be very rigid about those types of things. Set up whatever that procedure is. A voice verification is the one I recommend, but maybe you have other technology, other communications platforms that you can use for that. Any other questions? I don't see any in the Q&A. We'll give everybody a minute or two. In the meantime, I'll see if we have any poll results. So the bulk by about 50% is that the answer to the poll question was no, that we're not doing that type of training. So please, just play this short this webinar for your staff. That's certainly better than nothing. There's any number of other providers. Certainly There's other webinars on it as well that probably offer recordings. Get some kind of training, because a trained and aware staff is by far and away the best defense against any of these types of frauds. You need the educated employee. So we had another one. Are there other communications channels like Slack that might be prone to fraud, or is it primarily email? Email is easier, simply because it's more common. I'm sure Slack fraud is a possibility, but it's not as open as email. You have an extra layer of control, provided you've locked down your organization and don't have it open. We have one more question. Let me read it before I say it, rather. We had somebody literally during the webinar, their wife had received an invoice attached from Valvoline in New York saying, "Thank you for your service today." Yeah, so that's probably some kind of phishing thing. The idea there, I happen to know where this person he works in my company. I happen to know he's in Pennsylvania and was likely not in New York today, let alone getting his car serviced there. Yeah, so the idea is that, well, all right, this is a bill. I don't remember ever having this, and there's what's in there, right? We have this authority, like, you owe this person money potentially, so they can report you to the credit bureau. So just looking at the subject, right? There's already that social engineering going on, and yeah, they want you to open that, and then once you open it, there's going to likely be somewhere in there a PDF of a bill that says invoice, and the text of the email is probably just going to say, please pay this no later than 14 April, or whatever. I guess it's 16th, sorry. So please pay this no later than 20 April. Thank you for using Valvoline. And yeah, once you click that invoice and open it up, there's your virus payload, and they got you. So no more Q&A. I think we'll go ahead and cut it 3 minutes early. Going once, going twice on the Q&A. All right. Thank you all very much for attending. I hope this was useful. Again, feel free to reach out to any of the contact you see on your screen there. I'm happy to help, and let's all be safe and be healthy. Thank you, and have a nice day.